Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to see so many of you, some familiar and hopefully some new that I hope to give some information on how occupational therapy and how other types of healthcare providers can offer support. But I also want to be able to give you information for your own toolbox of how to learn how to pace. And so my background, as Angela said, is as an occupational therapist by training, but as a mother of a child with ME by heart. My daughter has been sick for 10 years plus and was a young child when she first got sick. So I have learned all of this information truly from blood, sweat, and tears from her and from all of you who have given me feedback, and some of it is quite direct, which I totally want, because this is how I hope to get the OT community on board and off of their old rickety ship of how they've traditionally provided therapy. So without, I guess, any more delay, I want to show you some slides and start to go deeper into what pacing for PEM looks like. And I also want to give you kind of the secret sauce of what I do with patients who are spending time with me as I get to know their symptom presentation and their challenges. So I would like to share with you my information, and also, I'm open for just kind of problem solving as we go through this presentation. Okay. And welcome to the Lunch and Learn. I hope this is some informative information. And as you know, that the faces for ME and long COVID with related ME, which means that they also can get PEM, and whatever they want to call it is fine. But we know what this disease really truly looks like. And what I really want the community to know is that PEM is not fatigue, that there is so much more to PEM. And I'm hopefully going to be able to dive into that. So like we all know, it is like running a marathon with the flu, having the worst hangover, and then getting hit by a bus. And those are just some of the symptoms, and everybody has unique symptoms, and they vary from time to time. And as you progress, probably 6 months ago, PEM can look different than it was today. Symptoms change. And also, like tugging an elephant, it's just overwhelming. So the piece that I begin with when I work with patients is looking at what are the symptoms and how can you start organizing them? Because it feels so overwhelming when you start just feeling all of the things come at you at once. And so I try to break it down and look at some patterns. And I know that it's hard to say there is any pattern, but truly, if things are looking more like the immune system is unregulated, or cardiovascular, or sleep abnormalities, I want to look at what some of these patterns are so we can start looking at what some of the stressors or the aggravators or the triggers are. So caring for people with ME, OTs and PTs are different professions. We may come from the same type of rehab services, but we do have different objectives and goals. So some of the pieces for OT and PT differ because of the component of OTs. The primary focus is getting you back to your occupation, and that is not your paid employment. It is your occupation of being a mother or a gardener, a sister, a mother, a grandmother. What are the things that actually make up the pieces or the components of your unique life? And physical therapy often looks at what are the locomotive pieces. How do you get there? How do you sit to stand? How do you walk across the room? So they're looking at maybe more of the motion and mobility components. Occupational therapy will look at how you do your jobs. And PT will look at how do you get to those daily living jobs. And occupational therapists, we look at the components of all of your occupations, your social engagement, how you participate as a friend and a church member. What are the social pieces? What is your leisure like? What are you doing to enjoy your days? And I know it's hard when you're experiencing ME that leisure is probably one of the first things to go. Social is probably crossed off the list too. So it goes down to the more foundational pieces of probably just activities of daily living. How do you do self-care? How do you eat? How do you manage your toileting and your showering activities? So these are all of the components that occupational therapy will traditionally look at and try to provide structure to enhance those activities. But for people that have ME, it's rather focused just due to the nature of the disease. And the conventional OT and PT guidelines, patients without PEM, typically looks at improving function and increasing activity to restore health and, in the end, improve the quality of life. And as we know, this is often used for the tip of the iceberg, what a therapist will see in the clinic and how they are able to perform in front of the therapist. And that's often used with graded exercise, graded activity, increasing strength and range of motion and endurance. That's how many times can you sit to stand or walk across the room. So they're measuring items, they're measuring outcomes to show what is able to be grown. But unfortunately, the iceberg of PEM is not accounted for. And that's where I look at flipping the iceberg. I want to know, what is it like, not with doing, I want to know what it is like for post activity and looking at the response to activity so that we can change and make adaptations to your overall performance. So this is where I became so incredibly frustrated with sitting as a caregiver, sitting in the hallways of therapy rooms, knowing that my child in the therapy room was having to perform for their therapist. And then I would take them home and watch the recovery process. And I would have multiple conversations with therapists to say, but you're not seeing it. You are witnessing what they can perform, but not what they respond to. And that is where I developed and came up with the help of thousands of other patients, this type of protocol that I look at what the recovery is like. I want to look what the tasks and the actual rest is like, so that autonomy, which is your ability to choose what is meaningful, can improve your overall daily living. So if somebody has more control or predictability in their choices of their day, they then can have more control, more autonomy, and more quality to their day. If they choose to do something meaningful, that hopefully will bring them some sort of meaning back to their life. And this is kind of the big glossy picture that I won't go detailed into, but this is where I look at identifying PEM. What are your core occupations? What is it that you want to do with your day? And then develop the treatment plan within the limitations of PEM. So pacing, that is the way to manage symptom exacerbation. We look at pacing in 3 different levels, which is pacing for individuals that do not have health concerns. That's like me. I know I need a good night's sleep. I know I need to move about my day. I get tired, I lay down, and I feel better. I don't have significant health concerns. But for people that have a therapeutic concern or a health concern that may benefit from therapy, such as increasing strength and range of motion, they could probably learn, they do learn the strategies from healthcare providers. And with that training, they go on to develop the strength in the core and return to their daily living. But for people that have PEM, pacing for PEM is the strategy, the specialized strategy for managing the task, your exertion, and your recovery. And that is where I want to give you guys the bulk of the information so that you can feel more empowered with your overall learning and be able to teach others, unfortunately, because I don't think this information is as widespread as it needs to be. So pacing for PEM. So the energy envelope, which Dr. Jason and others have really defined, has been used for a long time. And I do feel like energy envelope and spoons can be updated. We almost need to hit the update button on our phones for this one, because it does not necessarily encompass the whole dynamic elements of what PEM does encompass. It is not just a flat amount that you have $100 or 100 points in your energy envelope, and you can only use something at maybe 75 points per day. That's really hard to really visualize and know how to manage those kind of unknown points. And so I've tried to describe it, and I know Clayton Powers does, and other people talk about it as, you know, what kind of platform, what kind of iPhone do you have? Because I think we all know that as soon as that Apple resets and updates their platforms, our systems start running slower. And sometimes apps are taking up more power and more juice from our platforms that we then have to upgrade our phone. And so what I like to use as a metaphor is, what kind of iPhone are you using? And it can change from day to day or week from week. It might be an iPhone 10, or it might be an iPhone 2. And you're trying to run super apps on these phones. And when the app is stronger than your platform, you are going to go into deficit. And so you need to start shutting down some of those apps that are not being used properly. You need to take off the Wordle or the weather app or some of the stronger or Google Maps, because your platform for that day is too overwhelmed. And so I like to look at matching what kind of apps you're using for the platform that you really do feel for that day. So just asking and taking a little picture of yourself of saying, today I feel like I'm using an app, you know, an iPhone 5, and I have things in my day that I'm needing to do that should have an app, you know, have a platform of 10. I need to start making choices and start prioritizing what is going to be happening in my day or my week. Is there an event that's happening? Is there a birthday that I'm saving up for? So just being able to start regulating and recognizing, just as an iPhone type of technology. And the other one that is used for describing energy envelope is your credit card. What is your daily budget? And some days it might be $100 and some days it may be $10. But doing a self-reflective kind of analysis and to think, I am really low. My daily budget is maybe 10. And if I am going to take a shower, I am going to be using up 7. Or I am going to be, this birthday party is really important to me, and I know I'm going to go outside of my budget and actually go into a deficit. So what is my APR? Is my APR going to be, 30% payback that I'm going to have to owe to my imaginary bank just to make up for this birthday party that is extremely important to me? That might be something that you are going to choose because it is meaningful, and that way you have control over it. But it's going to take a lot of rest to be able to get back to your baseline balance. Baseline balance. So that's another analogy, if that helps you kind of manage these ideas a little bit better than just kind of a flat envelope or how many spoons you might have. And I've come up with a different type that I just want to throw another type of measure out there. And I look at it as, how many buckets do you have? You have customized thresholds for each of these buckets. And the first bucket is your physical tolerance or your physical exertion. And the second one is your cognitive. And then the third one is your social emotional. And I look at how your physical exertion, how full is it? Are you feeling like you actually could walk and you could walk around your kitchen, but you cannot necessarily look at a recipe or have a phone call with your daughter or your doctor because your bucket levels are at different levels? So I like to look at how your physical, your cognitive, and your social emotional all have its own threshold or kind of your own credit card. And you can do these activities for different choices. So that way you can make predictions of, if I do something physical, I am going to be on the couch for the next 2 days. But if I actually lay down, take care of myself, and have a conversation on the phone, I only have maybe, a 2-hour payback or rest period. So that's where I try to work with my patients to look at what are the different levels that your body has so that you can make a choice of what type of activity you would like to do. And part of this we need to understand is what you do and how you do it immediately will have symptoms, and then you have your delayed response symptoms. So if somebody is going to do a physical activity such as walking around the kitchen or standing to make a sandwich, you have certain physiological responses. Does your heart rate raise? Do you get dizzy? Do you start getting sweaty, or you're getting different temperatures? Your feet get cold, but your body gets hot. What are the immediate responses for that activity? And then looking at the delayed responses from standing in the kitchen to make a sandwich, maybe 12 hours or 24 hours later, you feel sore lymph nodes. You have coat hanger pain on your neck and your occipital lobe area. Those are your delayed response. And I want you to be able to feel and understand your symptoms better. I want you to have a better understanding that physical exertion, typically, not always, but typically I will feel this way for telling me my stop signs. I need to stop this activity or slow down my activity, and then kind of wait through the process so you know how long your rest needs to be so that you feel those symptoms in that delayed response. And then you know when you can move on to make the next activity that you want to do. And this is not booming and busting. This is actually being present and kind of acknowledging that your body is going to respond, and how can I protect it? How can I bubble wrap it the best way possible to get through this experience? And so what I ask is everybody to maybe take a moment just to think about, what are the stop signs for my immediate activity? When I look at a physical exertion, whether that be, like I said, standing in the kitchen to make a sandwich, or some people might be just rolling over in bed, or having to use the bathroom. Those are physical exertions. What are the three? And I know you're going to have probably 10, but what are the three most common symptoms that you feel when you have done too much? And I want you to think about how those three symptoms can be used to identify when you need to start slowing down and wrapping up that work, that job. When I start feeling lightheaded or that coat hanger pain in my shoulders, I know I need to start finishing my sandwich preparation. I need to find a chair and sit down, or even, lay down, go back to bed for a little while. So that's the first one, is what are the three symptoms for physical exertion? And then the next one is cognitive. You're looking at emails, you're scrolling on your phone, you're maybe reading something on, in a book or online. What does that cognitive exertion feel like? It's probably different than what a physical exertion is. So cognitive exertion may be, ringing in your ears or pressure in your head. It may be also, lightheadedness or heart racing. So some of those things those cognitive exertions will look different than your physical. And then your social emotional. What does it feel like when you are in a social situation, when somebody is talking like me, and you're feeling like, I'm about done. My tank is just about empty. What are those emotions, or what are those those social emotional exertions feel like? Is it word finding? Is it unable to listen and process information? So those symptoms, I would like for people to start understanding, are your stop signs for immediate PEM. So by looking at it as, those are my body's way of cueing me to slow down my task or even stop my task. That is your body's way of kind of bubble wrapping itself and saying, hold on, we need to wrap things up. And then we go to the delayed response and do the same thing. What does it feel like when I stood to make a sandwich? What did it feel like 24 hours later? I felt, my lymph nodes were so sore. I felt fluish. I felt just completely wiped out. For a physical exertion versus a cognitive, versus reading something. Well, my head still really ached. I needed to put an eye mask on because I could not take any more information through my eyes, or I had to wear headphones because my ears were so sensitive to any kind of floor creaking or any kind of noise. And then social emotional. For example, I had an upset stomach. I felt nauseous. I had air hunger for days. So those are the ways that we can start breaking it down so that you know how to protect yourself and how to get through those episodes, because I want you to be able to start making some sort of order to this, because once you have order, you can have a little bit of control over things. So when you start making a choice, I already feel nauseous. I haven't done anything and I'm already feeling nauseous. Well, if your top symptom for social emotional is GI upset and nausea, then the decision would be don't do something that's going to be social emotional. Your bucket is already almost empty in that category. Your choices could be something that is not going to stimulate or trigger that one part of your, your symptom exacerbation. So this is where I hope to reinforce that each of your buckets have an individual level. And by you getting a little bit more control over identifying, you can start saying, my physical is 50% full. I could do something physical, but I probably would really drain it really fast. Or, if I did something cognitive, that's not going to take away a lot of my water level or my bucket level. So that would be a better choice for me. So that's where just by doing assessments helps you kind of pick and choose what kind of task you are going to be more successful in. So this is just an example. When I have worked with different patients, we come up with a whole list of different things, and I'm just giving an example patient. And this person said that, this example person said that when they do something physical, this is usually how they respond. And it can change and it needs to be reassessed every once in a while, but usually their heart rate goes up, they get lightheaded and dizzy, they get foggy thoughts. Cognitive, their head starts buzzing, they have word find issue, and they get coat hanger pain. And then social emotional, they get ringing in their ears, they get this incredible headache, and then they also have slow thinking. It's just kind of like this foggy, mucky thought process. Okay, so then what do you do about it? There are some ways that I hope to give you some strategies, and this is through analyzing tasks and activities. And I'm not going to go through this, but I just want to show you that your ADLs can be broken down into the finest detailed ways. And this is what I do for a living, that I will look at personal hygiene and grooming and then go nitpicking through all of the, probably shouldn't use that term, but I go through the detailed dynamics of what personal hygiene and grooming can look like. Brushing your teeth, face washing, and then you think about all the moisture and cleansers and everything that goes into facial care. Hair care, you're going to brush your hair, dry your hair, comb your hair, spray, all of the details for that. So all of these activities of daily living, we take for granted in the healthy community, but for people with PEM especially, each of these activities is an overwhelming component of their day. To be able to wash your face and brush your teeth on the same day can be a huge challenge. So deciding which is a higher priority, is it toothbrushing or is it washing my face? Undressing on the other side in the middle column, dressing and undressing. How often do you need to make those choices of, I'm not taking the shirt off. It can be another day. I cannot tolerate putting my arms over my head and changing the shirt. So I am going to instead decide to, change my socks or put on a fresh pair of underwear. So just understanding how your body responds to the different position changes makes your activities of daily living more complex, and there are ways to get through this, but understanding that this is a big part of just doing your activity of daily living for taking care of yourself. And then occupational therapists work on really looking at the ADLs and also the IADLs, which are the instrumental activities of daily living. And this is for how you manage your house and your children, how you care for your pets, your community, how you engage in meal preparation, shopping, doing the dishes, doing some of these higher level functioning. And those are all pieces that are part of your activities, but at a more more complex level. It takes more to get these activities done. So often they go to a caregiver, but I also just want to give you guys all the information that you are doing a lot by just doing your ADLs. And I know that leisure is on your list, but this is why leisure isn't always an option, because you're so busy in this part of your daily function. So what I work on with individuals is looking at the task. What were those tasks, the grooming and self-care, feeding or shopping tasks? What are those big ones? And then looking at what is it that you must do? I must have food. I must have access to a toilet. I must have access to another person. I need to be able to interact with somebody. And then looking at what you might do. I might make a sandwich, but I also can just eat leftovers. So looking at what tasks, where is it on your priority list, and how meaningful is it to you? And that's where I start working on, like, let's start making our list. What is it that you must do? And then when you have a little bit of extra space in your buckets, what might you do, or what's your wish list? I really wish I could go, see a loved one or have a face-to-face conversation. But if that's not an option, I have to figure out where it goes on my priority list. And then the activity analysis is, what are the stressors? When I look at this activity and this plan, what is it that's going to stop me or interfere with how I get this activity done? Is it that the kitchen is literally too far away? So I need to have a sandwich. I need to figure out a way to get food to the couch or my bed. How does that get done? I need to have nutrition. And then looking at pace, how do I get this done with the energy, with my bucket levels? How do I pace? I look at eating at a certain time of day, or how do I do it within different, maybe within an hour? How do I finish this sandwich within an hour? I know I can't eat it all and digest it like I used to. And then looking at adaptations and modifications for your support. How can you do something that's not in the kitchen? Can you have leftovers or have a sandwich made for you? The modification is changing the goal, changing the outcome. The goal is to get food in your belly. I'm not going to be in the kitchen. I'm going to be on the couch. So I need to have my supplies right beside me. Those are modifications. And when I look at the job of making a sandwich, I'm going to look at how long it takes me. What's the time? How often I do this? Is it just once a day, or is it once a week and I make a few sandwiches at a time? How much time is between the rest? And then physical. What is my body feeling? What is my biofeedback? What is the location? Am I standing? Can I sit? Can I do something different physically? Cognitive. Do I have to remember the steps? of making a sandwich? Do I have to pay attention? Do I have to pay attention to the stove or something that I otherwise might be distracted by? Sensory. Can I look at this? Is the room too bright? Do I need to turn off my lights? Can I wear sunglasses in the kitchen just so I'm not visually overwhelmed, or headphones so I'm not having to listen to the refrigerator buzz? Smell. Is this sandwich going to make me really nauseous, or taste? So looking at all of the sensory components really tells your body what kind of sensory it can tolerate for this activity. And then emotional. Your rest is you're happy. Is this bringing me joy? And making a sandwich probably isn't the most emotional. Or does this bring me distress? Am I really upset about something? Is something that's going through my mind that's making me more upset? And then finally, the environment. Is there a storm? What is going on in the environment that might affect this? Is there a storm that's coming through? Is the barometric pressure changing? Are seasonal allergies really bad? Paying attention to all of the components of your environment help you make that decision. Is this the time and is this the place for this particular activity to happen? Or do I need to make a different choice because standing to make a sandwich might be overwhelming my buckets? And so this is the same thing that I kind of went through in the previous slide of I go through time for that activity. And this one is for grooming activity, for showering. What time of day? What are the physical demands of this particular activity? Do I have to remember the steps of showering or bathing or using lotions? And then sensory. Is this water going to be too intense for my skin? Is the shower going to literally feel like it's shooting needles at me? Can I sit in a chair and get a different type of shower head just to be able, so I don't have to have that intense feeling on my body? Are the smells of the lotions or the shampoo overwhelming? And then emotional, or just do you feel happy or stressed about this? I really do not want to have to do this at this time. I would be rather doing something else. And then again, like the environment, is the barometric, I'm big on barometric pressure. Is it changing? Some people respond to high pressure, some people respond to low pressure. And it's, I think, a good thing just to look at the weather app and find out when a storm is coming through and the pressure drops, do my symptoms get worse? And how low does it usually get before my headache or my body? Because your body's full of fluids. At what point does this affect my body and make me feel worse? So some people will respond to high pressure, but I do find that a lot of times low pressure is more common. And just looking out on your weather app for the next 24 hours or 48 hours, you can see when something is going to drop. And just paying attention, like, well, it really wouldn't be a good idea to take a shower at this part of my day because the weather is going to change significantly. So that's just one piece to keep in mind. And so looking at what your ADL performance looks like for your baseline, and then also on a crash. This is what I can do on a crash period. I'm back to using wet wipes. I'm not going to be even trying to be in the bathroom or doing anything close to a shower. And then the main piece is rest. What do you do once you have done an activity, you've noticed your stop signs, you have paid attention to your symptoms? How do you rest? And this is the radical rest for PEM. It is aggressive. It is being very involved in your past, in your present, in your future for rest. What I did 3 hours ago affects how I feel now. And I need to engage in that 3 hour ago activity. I need to rest aggressively. I need to put on my eye masks, my headphones. I need a weighted blanket. I need to take control and absolutely rest. so that I know my symptoms are going to persist for the next 12 hours or 48 hours, and I need to stay tight in this window. And that's where the recuperative rest, and I'm careful when I'm saying it's not getting you back to any kind of recovery. I know that. You are just recuperating from what you just did, what your activity of the last part of your experience, that's what you're recuperating so that you get back to a baseline and back into a preemptive rest. So it's kind of the cycle. You do preemptive rest, you save yourself for that one activity that you've chosen, you do your activity with a lot of control and a lot of awareness, and then you do your recuperative rest. And you do that for 2 days, 3 days, however long it takes, so that you start paying attention. I'm coming through. My symptoms of my sore throat, my lymph system is feeling better. I can now start engaging in preemptive rest. And that's because I have a prioritized event at the end of this little pathway. And I've broken it down. So this is, I'm almost done here. So I've used an example of a patient, and this is where in green, where it says activity, I chose the 3 buckets: the cognitive, physical, and social emotional. Cognitive activity, and this is what we had already talked about. What are your prioritized activities? You're cognitively going to do a 30-minute lesson on math. It does not sound fun, but this is for a student. That's one option. Or you can go for ice cream with your mom and your sibling. That was your physical choice. And then your social emotional was to do a hangout with a friend. This particular patient wanted to do ice cream with their sibling and mom. So then we went through and said, now let's pay attention to what your physical signs are going to be. And before you go off for ice cream, we already talk about this. Your symptoms may be your heart rate, your lightheadedness, and your foggy thoughts. So once you start feeling those, you then start putting the pause button on yourself to say, do I have 5 more minutes? Do I have 10 more minutes? I feel okay. I'm in the middle of my ice cream. I really want to finish this. And then they can make that choice. And then they've told me before that their delayed response for physical is a migraine, sore throat, and their body just feels like cement. So we know that. We hope that those delayed responses are not going to be severe at all, hopefully, because they've hopefully stopped a little bit earlier on their stop signs. So looking at the bottom rows, we look at preemptive. How are you going to prepare? You know that you want to go for ice cream with your mom tomorrow. How are you going to preemptively rest? What choices are you going to make? What activities are you going to restrict because you want to do this ice cream activity? The activity is ice cream. We've already talked about they're going to stay in the car and give their mom their order. They're going to maybe put their feet up on the dashboard while they eat their ice cream. They're going to do all of the things that we've talked about for kind of adapting and modifying that activity. They are going to start feeling before they get home probably that their heart rate is raising. So they then start their immediate PEM, but hopefully they've kind of cut it short because we've already become pretty aware of what those symptoms are. And then just by the fact of going out for that adventure, they will spend 1 solid day with heavier symptoms. And then maybe the next day, they're still symptomatic. They're not feeling well. They're still resting. They're still doing aggressive rest, but they're feeling slightly improved. And then the next day, they start feeling PEM lifting. And so now they're going back to their baseline and they feel like, I'm actually coming out of this. And I have this social thing that I kind of want to hang out with a friend. So that then becomes their next priority. And probably it wouldn't be a good idea to do another physical exertion, but if they did something social emotional, that's, they're maybe feeling better because they're their symptoms of cognitive or social emotional are not as drained as what their physical, what they had just gone through. And this is kind of the breakdown that I use with patients, and this is how we kind of problem solve and figure out what are your symptoms and what are your activities that you want to do. And then we go through this and figure out what are your rest strategies, what are you going to do for your preemptive. You're probably not going to be on Instagram and doing, a lot of scrolling and doing stuff because you're trying to cut down for certain things that are going to be kind of engaged in that same line of exertion. And then we look at in a kind of foreshadowing of like, what things are you going to do when you need to preempt, when you need to recuperatively rest. And that's where Bateman Horn has a great crash and doing all those different types of strategies, getting your weighted blanket and your headphones and your electrolytes and getting all the materials that you really need to help you with your recuperative rest. And then this is just an example of kind of like that part of, you wait on a day-to-day basis of a schedule of you might, maybe your baseline would be waking up, doing a small activity, taking a rest, having some lunch, doing some rest, and on and building in those rest periods for your baseline day. But if you know that you're going to be doing something that you're exacerbating your symptoms, your rest periods are going to be bigger, longer, and your self-care or your activities are going to be narrower and more modified. And then this is just an example of also what I talked about, how what you need to do is monitor your activity and your rest. Your activities will vary depending on your symptom intensity and tolerance for exertion. So this just kind of reviews what we just went through in describing your preparing yourself for an activity and how then you go about grabbing hold of aggressively of your rest. And then the accommodations and modifications. I'm just going to give you an outline of it because this is something that we can maybe talk about a little bit more in our discussion. But it's really individual based. It's looking at your overall goals and your functional outcomes. Accommodating, for somebody that is needing accommodations in their bed, having a table that really supports their upper body. So you're not needing to take a lot of strength and range from your upper body. If you have your arms already supported in bed, then you have use of your fingers. So using all of your body supported in every way with bolsters and tabletops is how you then have the most control and most conservative energy conservation strategies for your body's use. And then also like evaluating your symptoms using checklists and daily logs just to understand how your symptoms present. And if you have POTS or EDS, there are strategies wearing, compression garments or support grips for your hands or gloves for your hands. If your hands are really hypermobile, sore, really irritated, using things that come from those communities can help your body be able to tolerate the use of itself for modified activities. And always, no matter what, you have PEM, that comes first. You cannot use the Levine or the Utah Adapt or any other kind of protocol when you have PEM as your overlying diagnoses. Because even if somebody that has POTS and PEM tries activity, it's the PEM that takes control at that point. So creating accommodations and recommendations is individual and it can change, but I think that can make all activities a little bit more manageable. And thank you. Thank you so much for your attention.